Hey there, darlings. Welcome to another Self-Love September episode. As you can see from the title, this one is a little different. Are they all different? I feel like they are all fairly different, but this one might come as a surprise to some of you, and to others of you, it might be actually the video that you've been waiting for, that you've been somehow hoping on some unconscious level would come up. Maybe you didn't know you need it, but now it's here. You're like, yes, thank you. This is what I need. So, okay, we can't be universally liked. We can't be liked by everybody. We can't be appreciated by everybody. Sometimes we simply play a role in a person's life that makes us a natural enemy, a natural rival, a natural competitor to that person. Other times it'll be because something happened, something was said, there was a situation, we were on different sides of it. It could be a family thing if it's a loved one. If it's an ex-friend, it could be a different point of view that created a big rift between you both because you felt like those different points of view reflected a betrayal or a ravine in the relationship. There are a number of different reasons why you might feel hated, or you might very much know that you are strongly disliked, if not hated, by somebody. Of course, hate is always a fairly strong word, and I'm not always talking about hate when I'm going through things in this video, but obviously just for the purposes of giving the video a title, that was what I went with. Obviously, when you're watching a resource like this, you have to go to the situations that are relevant for you. And I'm not going to be able to knock every nail on the head with what's relevant for you and what you need to hear or what is going on with you. For some of you, you're also going to feel that you strongly dislike the person who strongly dislikes you. And that's going to be a bit different to somebody who maybe feels disliked or knows that they are disliked or not appreciated by somebody, but they don't feel the same in return. They actually would like to strike up a friendship or have a connection, but unfortunately the other person doesn't feel the same. So there are different situations. And so obviously, as usual with my stuff, take what resonates with you, leave the rest. You know, I always give that disclaimer. So the first thing I'm going to say right out of the gate is obviously 9 times out of 10, more than 9 times out of 10, it's not pleasant to be disliked. There may be the odd thing where, let's say, for instance, if you have social media platforms and you have a voice online, there may be, for instance, a time where you recognize that when you start to pick up a certain amount of hate, a certain amount of criticism, you get people really sort of vehemently disagreeing with what you're saying and saying that they don't like you, they don't like what you stand for. You might realize in that moment that you've kind of made it. And you might enjoy that feeling of being the object of somebody's derision, because you might think, well, you know what, that shows me I'm on the right track. It shows me I'm making an impact. There's definitely something like that. And there's definitely also some, I guess, perhaps more shadowy reasons why you might enjoy somebody's dislike of you. Perhaps you know that it comes from a place of jealousy. You know that they envy something in you that is strong, or something in you that is beautiful and empowered. And so you might take it as a compliment. And in a way, as long as you're aware of that, and as long as you are aware that you are enjoying the effect of knowing that you are empowered rather than enjoying somebody else's pain, I think there's not that much to deal with really in that regard. But certainly you could say there's a spectrum of shadow. And within that spectrum of shadow, there are a number of different reasons why you might enjoy being disliked. You might enjoy being hated. But for most people in most situations, you know, it's not comfortable, it's not pleasant, and it would be nice if it came to an end, you know? Particularly, as I said, if you kind of feel neutral towards the other person, but they seem to have a really strong dislike for you. So it obviously makes sense whenever you're experiencing something like that you take the time to think about whether or not you are okay with yourself. Are you comfortable with who you are? Are you happy with the decisions that you're making in your life? Are you comfortable with your ethics and your principles? Do you know that you are not somebody that's out to cause harm or be destructive? Do you know that you are on the right track and you are not worthy of somebody's hatred? Because whether or not they see you with dislike, whether they think badly of you or not, you have to know that when you put your head on the pillow at night, you feel comfortable with who you are, and you feel comfortable with what you're getting done in the world and how you're behaving in the world. And that's got to be the first thing on your mind. And whenever you worry about somebody else's opinion of you, if you let that keep you up at night, if you let that stop you from doing what you need to do in the world, obviously there's a point where you have to have a strong talk with yourself about the fact that you can't allow these things to stop you. A person's opinion of you cannot permit you to stop doing what you want to do with your life, because at the end of your life, you know, you're going to have to answer to that. You're going to have to account for that with yourself, and it's not going to have felt worth it, believe me. So are you happy with where you are? Are you on track with where you want to go? Are you comfortable with the way that you're behaving and the decisions that you're making? And if you feel that you can say yes, that you can answer yes to those questions, then you're already taking a really important step. to help yourself and love yourself, despite the fact that you're not universally liked by others, and you might be particularly singled out for hatred or dislike by someone. Obviously, it never feels good. But if you know that you're comfortable with yourself, you love yourself, you know where you're coming from, you get what it is you're trying to do, then that goes a very long way to dealing with this kind of thing. If you need to make amends for anything, have you made amends? You know, if you need to apologize, if you need to seek forgiveness, have you done so? If you know that there are things that you've done that, would warrant somebody feeling a certain amount of disdain towards you, distrusting you, or whatever the case may be, then you have an opportunity every single day that you're alive to do something about that. Even if you know that the relationship is essentially severed with that person and you can never get that relationship back, you can still very much recognize that there are things that you can do in terms of your own self-development and your own healing to make sure that you never behave in that way again, to make sure that you never make that mistake again and you never put that particular foot wrong. So it can be worthwhile just thinking about whether or not you've made the amends that you know that you need to or would like to. And sometimes we're putting that off, either because it's from a place of ego, or it's because we feel like we don't have the time, we don't have the energy. Maybe we're very much focused on what's going on in the future, and we feel like we don't have the impetus to look back. We don't have the energy to look back. But I think these kinds of things catch up with us. If we know that there's something that we need to address, something about our behavior that wasn't quite right, that might have warranted a certain disdainful reaction from somebody else, then yeah, it's important to look at that stuff. It's important to potentially shadow work that stuff. And if you do know that you want to apologize, then do so, and try to do so without any rigid expectation of what will come to you in return. Just do it because you feel you should do it. Just do it because you know that that's the right thing, and you've had that word with yourself and you know that that's the right thing, and you feel it makes sense. If somebody doesn't take your apology, if somebody doesn't want to know you still, if somebody still thinks very badly of you, at least you know that you've done the thing that you felt was appropriate for the situation, and you've put yourself in a place where, as I mentioned previously, you can sleep at night. You feel like you have behaved in the way that connects with your morals and links up with your principles and seems like it's you. It seems like it's a genuine thing that you wanted to do or you wanted to say. If you're confused about whether or not you do need to express regret for something, or you do need to say sorry, or you do need to make things right, honestly, just sit after this video and take a bit of time to think about it. Ask yourself, do I need to do any of these things? Is this something that is going to be a part of my journey? Is this something that makes sense for me to consider? And if you find that the answer is no, then at least you've had an honest exploration. At least you've come to an honest answer as the result of asking yourself the question, rather than just shutting it down and thinking, I don't need to say sorry for anything. I don't have anything I need to make amends for. I'm not the one in the wrong. Sometimes it's useful to just have that exploration, especially if you've never had it before, and just think to yourself, is there anything that I'm unclear on with regard to my actions, my words, my decisions that I can say sorry for, or at least reflect upon privately to myself, with myself? Here's a really big one. Whenever you know that you are disliked by somebody, you are strongly disliked, you're hated by somebody, are you a symbol of something for them? If you are, then very often there is absolutely nothing that you can do about that. That is their work that they need to examine and they need to get behind. They need to decide to do that work. It's not really something that you can come along and put right for them or ultimately help them with. If you're a symbol of something that reflects badly upon them or pokes their shadow or reminds them of the past, then that's something that eventually they may come to deal with on their own terms in their time. But often it's not something that you can help. If you are just living your life, doing your thing, and you find that you are poking somebody's shadow merely just by doing what you're doing, being a representation for them of something that they are not comfortable with, then you have to know, like I said right at the beginning, and I'll keep reiterating it, that you're comfortable with you. You're comfortable with who you are. You're comfortable with the way that you are responding to the challenges set in front of you. You have your ethics, you have your principles, you have your way of working around challenges and experiences, and you're comfortable with that. You feel like there's not really anything ungroovy in the woodshed. There's nothing that you really need to question within yourself. If you know that you just represent something to someone that's uncomfortable for them, that makes them feel unpleasant, then that's going to be their work to do. And all you can do is make sure that you are shielded and protected away from whatever it is that they might be throwing at you energetically, or in terms of the language they're using, in terms of the way they are around you. It's perfectly okay for you to recognize that you are in harm's way as the result of the way somebody treats you because of what you symbolize to them. And it's perfectly okay to recognize that you need to move away from someone treating you in that way. When someone doesn't like you, when they're treating you with disdain, not only do you have the right to protect yourself by reducing the amount of time you spend around them, blocking them on social media, maybe even cutting away from the connection entirely, you also have the right to consider what you expect from others around you in terms of their willingness to understand the ways in which you need to protect yourself. Let's say, just for an example, that your husband's ex-wife really doesn't treat you very nicely, doesn't have nice things to say about you, might write passive aggressive things about you on social media. Let's say that she's snippy with you, or she cuts you down, or whatever the hell it is that she does. You might feel that you have certain expectations towards your husband in terms of his reactions to this. So if you feel like you're just battling with this alone, if you feel like you're dealing with this alone, if he isn't even prepared to acknowledge it, and if he isn't prepared to stand behind you, if you feel you need to take some form of action or say something, then you might feel like you've been really let down, because you might feel like, okay, you know what, there are certain people in my life whom I need to be able to rely upon to stand behind me if I feel like I need to take some action to protect myself. You might feel like somebody in your life makes excuses for a person that really treats you in a bad way or dislikes you very strongly. And you might feel like that's not okay. You might feel like, you know what, it's okay for this person to take a neutral position if they are literally in between me and this other person. But it's not okay for them to make excuses for something that is blatantly happening and something that is blatantly affecting me. So you might feel as well as though it's important for you to tighten up your ideas of what you expect from others around you. And I'm not saying, always expect everybody else in your life to get involved and push your agenda for you and fight your battles for you. But certainly there are situations where you might feel that you're dealing with something alone, that you are being targeted and you're dealing with it alone, and you're not happy with that because you feel like your partner or your friend or your sibling or whatever should also acknowledge that there is something difficult going on. And everybody's different. Everybody reacts to things differently. Of course, one person might really kind of run to your aid, jump to your rescue, and somebody else might not necessarily. But what you don't want is to feel that a loved one is in denial about the way you've been treated, or that they don't support whatever action it is that you feel you need to take to protect yourself. It's really hard because every situation is so different, so nuanced, and there might be certain ways in which you can appreciate why people behave the way they do. And you might be able to sort of examine the situation as a whole and think, you know what, it is difficult. And sometimes people haven't behaved as I would like them to, but I can see their position as well. So sometimes, it's easy to understand why you might not have received the reaction you wanted from those around you that you hoped would understand your need to protect yourself. Always know that no matter what happens, you have the right to protect your emotional well-being, your mental health, your physical safety. And whether or not other people are going to come along for the ride with you on that, it's something that you have a duty to yourself to do. And that's something that we can never forget. When someone has a strong dislike towards you, you might really feel that nasty energy coming off of them. You might feel that sense of bad intention towards you, that sense of ill will. As a result of that, you might feel that you need to contrast that with loving, encouraging, supportive, positive, high vibe words that you give to yourself. You might feel that you need to nurture yourself in love, wrap yourself in strong, supportive words. Let yourself know that you are beautiful and you are strong and you are empowered and you are all of these wonderful things. Give yourself the love and the support that you feel will contrast and combat whatever it is that you feel is being directed towards you. Along the way, as you're dealing with someone who has strong negative feelings towards you, you might find that you are attacked in a certain way that makes you want to retaliate in the same manner. And that's one of those things where you do need to have a word with yourself about that and about the likelihood that there's going to be anything positive coming out of that. Sometimes you'll notice that there are certain tactics that are being used against you, or there's a certain way that you're being spoken to or being spoken about. And it might be very tempting for you to kind of play the game on that same level. And it might be something that you feel sort of instinctively in a flash that you want to sort of mirror back to that person, if only to just let them know how it feels. But a lot of the time, it only makes things worse, it only makes things more incendiary. It might actually make the other person feel quite gleeful to see you kind of move away from your way of dealing with things and take on their language and their manner and their way of dealing with things. It can actually give them a feeling of control and a feeling of having power in the situation. You're giving the other person the upper hand quite often by moving to play the game by their rules. So it's really important that you maintain a strong sense of self and stay strong, stay connected to your center and your sense of what is right, your principles, your way of wanting to deal with things, regardless of what the other person is doing. You might need to be honest with yourself about where you are subtly engaging with the other person in order to glean a reaction from them, make them feel negative in some way, make them feel insecure. And you may very well be doing it as a reaction to what it is that they've done to you, but you may still need to be honest with yourself about how that's having a negative effect on you, because it's not really your style. You know, it may very well not be your style. It might not be how you really want to deal with it, but you find yourself dealing with it that way because you're under stress, you're under pressure, it's getting to you, you're kind of starting to see cracks in your own way of dealing with it. And it's okay to have a moment where you're just gentle with yourself, but honest with yourself about the behaviors that you are utilizing and how you want to really pull back on that, because it's not really how you want to deal with things truly. I think sometimes when you get into a situation with someone who dislikes you and who may be attacking you or just sending a bit of a shitty vibe your way, you might feel like there's no way to change the situation. And if you've gotten involved in it and some of your behaviors haven't exactly been glowing either, you might feel like there's no way you can come back from that. There's no way you can change that. But I will always say, you know, there's something that you can tweak, there's something that you can change, there's something that you can decide to do differently. There's a way that you can protect yourself, there's a way that you can reduce the extent to which this other person's behaviour is permitted to be harmful towards you. You know, maybe you need to go back to the drawing board, maybe you need to explore the options, but there are some options there. Don't tell yourself that you are tied to a post and this is it now for the rest of time and you don't really have any control over the situation or even the way that you're behaving in the situation. I think that's a very disempowering position to come from, and it's natural over the course of time if you feel you're being attacked or you feel you're being unfairly disliked or judged. It's natural to feel that this is just going to be an ongoing shit sandwich that I'm going to have to keep eating for the rest of eternity. But actually, it's not the case. You know, sometimes we just need to go back to what are the possibilities for protection, what are the possibilities for harm reduction, and how can I make sure that I'm behaving in the way that sits right with me and feels right for me. One thing that I think is very hard to do when you acknowledge that you are disliked or hated by somebody is to acknowledge that they may never give you the time of day and it may never be resolved. If you feel like you've been pushing for quite a while for some kind of happy resolution and you feel like it's never gotten any closer and it really does just always feel like a bit of a mirage, then you need to acknowledge that that's probably the truth of it. And the reason that I say that is because we do expend a lot of energy sometimes pushing and pushing and pushing for a different result that never comes. And a lot of the time, I think that energy needs to be reinvested back into self so that we can do the things like protecting ourselves, shielding ourselves, making sure that we're focusing on harm reduction, making sure that we are behaving in a way that is in alignment with our principles. It's very difficult to do that if you're very low on energy and if you keep striving for and pushing for this outcome that you wish would be the case that never seems to be getting any closer to you. So I think after a while, we need to acknowledge, you know what, sometimes a person just wants to hate you. A person just loves to hate you. They want to believe what they want to believe about you, whether it's true or not, whether they've got any evidence for it or not. It is something that somehow makes them sleep better at night for a while. It's something that makes them feel more secure in their sense of self. If they want to set you up as the villain, then that's what they're going to do. And very often, you know, your ability to be able to change their perception is going to be very limited. So a lot of the time you have to look at the energy expenditure that is going into trying to seek a different result from someone who's just stuck on their way of viewing you, and there is nothing that you can do about it. And I think as well, the more that you focus on trying to get that person to think differently about you, the more that you actually pull away from acknowledging how you feel about you. And how you feel about you is the principal thing on the self-love journey. It's not so much about what other people think of you or their judgments of you, because that's a hang up that you could get stuck on all day. You could be on that hamster wheel for the rest of eternity. And there's nothing self-loving about being on that hamster wheel, let me tell you. Darlings, thank you so much for listening to these thoughts and feelings that I have about dealing with someone that hates you and being self-loving despite being disliked. I would love to know down in the comments what your thoughts and experiences have been on this topic. I find this one particularly interesting. It's definitely something that I've dealt with in a number of different ways, not only because I have a public platform, but also just in my personal life and my professional life as well. So I would love to be able to read in the comments what your experiences have been and kind of compare and contrast them to mine as well. So much love and self-love, darlings. Blessed be. In the woods, under dust, and the fairy